There are many things in this world that are meant to be bent, like the strings on a guitar or the banking rules for international finance. Other things you should never bend under any circumstance, such as babies and the truth. And I'm about to hit you with some truth right now about bending guitar strings. So basically, what does it mean to bend a string? Basically, if you have, like this is just gonna be the 9th fret on the G string, right? I can bend it to a different pitch. So if I bend it, I'm altering the pitch. So this note is an E. If I bend it, I can bend it up to an F or up to an F sharp. Sometimes I can even bend it way up to like a G or something like that. But the main thing to think about is how do you bend a string? A lot of times I'll see maybe beginners try to bend with one finger. Now that puts a lot of pressure on the one finger, and it's easy to get sloppy when you're doing stuff like that. So rule number 1 is don't be a hero. Use your entire hand, have all your fingers help when you bend a string, right? A lot of times, even like if you're bending, all these apply to an acoustic guitar too. I'm just using an electric guitar because it's a little bit easier to demo, but acoustic guitar has thicker strings, so it might be a little harder to bend a full step or 2 full notes on an acoustic guitar, but you can always get thinner strings on an electric or an acoustic if you really want to make bending your thing, right? These are 9-gauge strings on Telecaster. But yeah, so the number 1 thing to remember is to bend with multiple fingers. See how I have my index, my middle, and my ring finger all on the same string, and I'm using all of them. Another thing you might notice is the actual angle of my wrist is moving. It's not just my fingers. I mean, you can still get like a good finger bend without using your wrist, but I find the muscle memory is a lot better, and you have more vibrato options too, if you kind of think of it as like a door hinge, right? Now, a natural question you might have, do I bend the strings down or do I bend the strings up? If you can get it to sound good, it really doesn't make a difference, but kind of a good loose rule to follow is if you're talking about the highest 3 strings, bend those up. If you're talking about the lower 3 strings, bend those down. The reason for this is like for the E string, right? The high E string, if you bend it down, you can go off the fretboard really easy. You can do that with the B string too. Now, it's uncommon on the G string, but you know, it can still happen. Same thing, the opposite is true, like the A string. It sounds terrible when you bend it up and off. So, rule of thumb for me, I kind of bend the higher strings up and lower strings down. Now, there are exceptions to this, and for me specifically, the way, if I'm ever playing and bending 2 strings down at the same time, like a Motorhead type thing, that doesn't mean you can't bend it up, but for me, if I'm bending 2 strings at the same time, I like to bend them down. Now, there is a tactical advantage to bending the higher strings up, which we're going to talk about right now. So let's take the 12th fret, which is a G, on the G string, right? Now, if I bend this up, I have all these strings beneath it that I can still play. Right? So while I have this note bent up, I can hit the B string and the E string, because I'm kind of barring it. I'm still using my fingers to help out. And then I can kind of rock that note back down. Another really important thing, if you really want it to sound good, you kind of have to use your face and make it seem like you're in pain, like. For some reason, it just makes it sound better. Another really cool thing you can do when you're bending up is a thing called unison bends, right? Now, a unison bend is when you're bending one note and equaling the pitch of a different note. So let's take that same 12th fret, right? So I'm bending a G, and I want to bend it up to an A, right? Now on the B string, the A is the 10th fret. So that note is the same as that note. So if I bend this note up to this note, I have 2 of the same notes at the same time. And you can kind of hear them resonating with each other or slightly off if they're really close. Jimi Henxdrix was like a master of unison bends. Like for example, I think it's Highway Child. They're all kind of unison bends. And now the most common place to do that would be bending the G string to the same pitch of the B string. You can also bend the B string to the same pitch of the high E string, but you have to start 1 fret higher. So you can bend up. And now if I were to bend down, I can't really do the same thing. So there is a tactical advantage to bending the strings up. Now, it can be kind of intimidating to think of bending to a certain pitch. Like if you don't have perfect pitch or your ears might not be as advanced, like, do I want to bend this G note up to an A? Like, what if I'm just kind of flat? What if I'm not there all the time? Really, my advice is to not worry about it too much, and don't worry about having to hit a certain note. I think for me personally, bending a note is really more just to kind of like bring attention to one part in like a solo or a riff. Even if it's not, let's just say it's not unmusical if you're bending it to a pitch that isn't technically in the key. Like if you're not bending this to a perfect pitch every time, don't get caught up on this, because really you're just kind of training your ears and your hands to kind of get to the pitch that you want. Like B.B. King was a master of these kind of like micro little bends where like he's maybe not bending it to a certain tone or semitone every time. He's just really kind of feeling it. Like blues players are really good at that, how it's not about what note you're bending to it, you're just kind of manipulating a certain note and drawing more attention to it, therefore making a solo more lively, because everything doesn't always have to be in key and in tune every single time. A lot of times if you bend to a pitch that might be unexpected, it has like a really cool effect and it draws a lot of attention to a certain part of a solo. Now, unison bends can be a little bit tricky because you kind of have to keep one finger anchored to the B string, if you're doing it on a G and B string thing, while one finger moves. So the tendency might be to have them both move with each other. It takes a little bit of practice, but if you do it, you'll get it. I think a really good place to start is actually on the 2nd fret of the G string and the B string, because what you're doing is you're going to bend this A to this note, which is a B, right? So if you do them both at the same time, you can get the open B string to resonate with this A that you're bending to a B. So you don't have to worry about keeping one finger stationary while you do the other one. You actually have an open string to help you out. Same thing with the B string on the 3rd fret and the high E string. I can bend this D to E and kind of get them the same way. So if you want to start with unison bending, that's a good way to do it right there. Another cool thing you can do is when you have a note bent up to a higher pitch, you can choke it off right there. So, right? I think the tendency is to, every time you bend, come back down, right? So it creates kind of a jarring effect. Like Lynard Skynard was a really good band at using kind of these bends that kind of stop at the top, right? Like, so really kind of all these little techniques are just great ways that you can use your actual fingers to manipulate the tone that you want to do. So really, just remember to use multiple fingers when you're bending. Try to do unison bends. Try to hit notes under what you're bending while you have something up. And always remember that you can kind of stop a note by doing that. And what I'm doing there is just I'm taking my pick and I'm kind of stopping it right here. So I'm stopping the vibration with my right hand. Getting it up, stopping it, right? So to recap, have fun bending guitar strings to your heart's desire, but never ever bend a baby or the truth.